Okay, so we can start. I think others will join us later. And today we'll talk about the minimum valuable product in the automatization process. My name is Anton. There is a Kamaka community. I'm one of the leaders of this community. We have Core Hard, C++ community. I'm also one of the leaders of this community. We have community of Internet T, of IT specialists who migrated to Belarus, and I am one of those. I moved from Crimea to Belarus and still work and live here for more than 18 years already. And recently I've been specializing in the automation of testing. Who is doing the automation, like from the technical point of view? A lot of you here in this room. And who is also a manager, or fulfills some managerial tasks in automatization? Okay, so the relevancy of the audience is very high. So, I'm a little sick, so that's why my throat is sore. I have to get good sleep and recover, but please be patient. And I think we'll cope with that. So we have automatization of yesterday, of today, and of tomorrow. And the minimum valuable product, MVP, of each of them is different. And you may ask me, why should we discuss this MVP so intensively? I think that there is a paradox. On the one part, we all are, or majority of us, are working based on agile, lean techniques. So we are all saying that the waterfall classic architecture is not good enough, and when we have to think 10 years ahead and create a monster for all cases, and half of this monster is not used. But as soon as we start talking about automation of testing, we try to stick to technical tasks rather than strategic or managerial, and all the reasoning behind the solution that I've described to you, they are not used. So in order to use the lean technique regarding MVP, so we have to start with something bigger than MVP actually. And same with architecture. We develop application in accordance with all the recommendations. We do it in an integrative ways, etc. But with the architecture of optimization, we just make the first waterfall. We have 4 years. In half a year, we make the first test, universal for all situations. And all these challenges we can divide into yesterdays, todays, and tomorrows. So actually, I've observed the transition from yesterday to today, and I hope that I will see also the transition from today to tomorrow. But these things are quite obvious. In automatization, we just have to use the premium practices, integrate engineering culture, scaling engineering culture, and all this stuff. Yesterday, most of you probably remember that yesterday we had some big and complex tools, maybe even much more complex than today's, but they didn't require this deep engineering culture or deep knowledge. It wasn't that they were easier to use, but they required a different skill set. And automation of tomorrow, it requires to be based on something. So we have to, if we go somewhere, we have to have an aim. It should be decrease of costs or increase of the profit. It should be progressive increase. And in tomorrow we have the big data and AI. And also we'll have the day after tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So, and we'll have to formulate the minimum valuable product. We should be adapted to each of these values, approaches, domains. So this is the table, general one, showing the situation. I understand that this is a kind of an average temperature of the patients in the hospital. Why 1 week, 2 weeks? Because we don't know the context of the project yet. But I think this is an example, and well, it's an example of a quite popular type of the project. This is a web, and here we are talking about automation of testing primarily, and also about this kind of level of services. So we are not going to talk about it in more detail, but so this is an application of average size, and here we are taking into account not on average values. Average values are just for us to know the way in general, and we have to know also relative values. And the customer normally says we have to cover the smokes, and please do that. And also sometimes the testers, the team of testers, just have to use the strategy, general strategy, but the customer says, okay, you use this strategy, but he doesn't know that we have to also apply automation here. So that's why we have to include this component in the strategy or create a separate strategy for automation. It shouldn't be even a big document. It can be 5 lines on paper, but we have to define the context. Yeah. So we need strategy. This is the first point. The second point, although we are reassured that always that there is a strategy, it's ready-made. No, it can't be ready. It has to be adapted. Maybe just 1% has to be changed, but it has to be changed. And we need around 1 week of one person's work. This is an average value because we have to approve that, then it has to be sent to us. Or an opposite situation. We don't have any documents, but we get the application quite quickly. Okay, so if we can communicate manual testers, those who know the platform, if we try to investigate it actively ourselves, so we can develop some kind of approximate strategy. But everything starts with the context. So what is our starting point for automatization specialist? Well, when we say that, okay, we need 1 week to write a document, why? The whole week? Well, first we have to start with the context, right? We define the context, and then in an iteration we go around the cycle, planning, prototyping, and definition of the ROI. So at the first stage we get the strategy, then set of metrics and KPI to reach the business objectives, and reports in some defined formats. It can be general recommendations, it shouldn't be complete detailed documentation. But at the end of the next cycle, we get planning, prototyping, and ROI. And also we need test plan, and then we have 1 or more test plans. For each of these plans, we have to find, based on experts review, optimal set of tools and techniques. And actually, expert review is much better than friends' advice or your relatives' advice. But at the end of the day, it's a human factor, human advice. You just get an advice of somebody, maybe of my daughter, right? But we need real figures, and it can be provided by return on investment. And this is a big topic. What should this ROI be? But without ROI, we don't have the key metrics. We don't know the updated test plan, the tool set for automation, which we can use and make proof of concept based on that. So this is the best choice. But how do we know that this is the best choice? And also it has to be expressed in money so that we can compare the risks. For example, this one is cheaper, but risk is higher, or vice versa. So at the second stage, we shouldn't be too quick. So we don't have developed tests. We have only test prototypes, but it's not enough. And then we come to this MVP, minimum valuable product, at the end. Finally. So normally, again, we are talking about the average temperature of patients in a hospital, because the time of one test development is 3 weeks in automotive, so we just deploy environment in an automotive project. We can forget about the MVP. But first we have to define what is actually the MVP. This should be a system of CI/CD. This is reporting system. Then it's minimum architecture and infrastructure. And again, just to make it more simple, but in a more simple way, it's not that we need 20 smoke tests, and this should be smoke tests. No, we just take some representatives. It should be clear, concise, transparent, and it should be clear to business and technical specialists, so that we can click all the controls in one big test, and that's it. And here you see like the intermediate figure, 3 weeks. Based on my experience, in 6 weeks, 6 weeks is normally the time needed to develop MVP. Of course, again, it's like average temperature of patients in the hospital. But based on the experience, we might say that, okay, 6 weeks should be enough to develop the MVP. And it will include the following. First, strategy. We have defined what objectives do we have to fulfill by testing. Then we have very specific plan and optimum set of tools and the full cycle. So of course, yes, we have only 20 tests, but we have pre-commit event, post-commit event, and they can be deployed, launched. The reports can be sent to all the stakeholders, and it can occur 20 times per day. So they help to wield some profit. Okay, the value is small, but it is there. And agree that this is different from what we are normally seeing in the automatization. So in 4 weeks we get the full cycle, which brings the value. And the payback point, this is also just for the reference. Let it be not 1 to 3, maybe it will be 2 or 8, but just to understand the scale here. But for average web project, after 18 weeks of investment, if we do everything right, if you get the maximum return from the investments, so then the point of return should be here. Okay, and another very important thing is that I have to understand that we can update it, extend it, balance it, and adapt for your typical projects, and based on that, normally 18 weeks is enough to get to the point of return, and the whole cycle is 26 weeks. But what can be done next? It can be training of the personnel or support of the personnel. But so, and normally you perform an excellent project, but at the last day we get that we don't have an experienced trainer who speaks the language, etc. But in order to complete the project, everybody in the customer's team have to be sure that the developers team will cope with that, and they are not sure. But why is it useful for us? We can analyze the real situation with the project, the company, environment, business environment, and adapt this tool to it. And here we have the strategy, which we normally don't do, but we have to. MVP, which is normally combined with development of auto test, and then this puzzle is made closer to the end or to the middle of this process. And these are the examples of how the schedule and artifacts can be used. Okay, and again, yes, we all know that. So here we define what kind of problems can be resolved by that. But this is a business presentation. We are not promoting any particular company. But what has to be taken into account? That this is the average picture. And after that, we get some kind of specialization, expert review, we get some experience, and we see, okay, we have the industry, these are the options, how to test, and MVP probably will be completely different in this case. The solutions will be different for desktop, for web, for mobile application. And at the end, we'll have the set of tables, similar to what you see on the screen, for different platforms, for the most popular for us, domains, and for the most important for us types of testing. Okay, we could make safety testing, but we don't have enough experts, and crying out that we don't need safety testing, we shouldn't do that.
And that means that you haven't done the security testing integrated, and as a result you have a very good instrument that you will use during the whole life cycle of the project. So basically you have something for management, something for as an internal documentation, you have something for pre-sales, you have some specialists who are ready for consulting, because consulting is basically the reverse engineering of this MVP. So if you understand it one way, it will be very easy for you to understand the other way around as well. So what else do we have here? There are different models of cooperation. You can also transport it to these things. If you want fixed bit, you understand that you'll have some advantages from automation, and it will be us who will get those things. So you can see that the process is very similar to what we have already mentioned. You can see these phases, the stages. We need an audit in the beginning, then we have to create a prototype, we have to implement this prototype, and it can be a rather time-consuming thing, because we'll have to train our specialists. So basically everything that we had in those one or two pictures, it has to be, it is a very good information about MVP, minimum valuable product, even though it is the average temperature on of hospitals. So okay, let's have some questions, as there are 100% of those present here are professionals and you're working with MVP and testing, so please ask your questions. It is lunch soon and you'll be happy to have your lunch after the questions. Thank you. Thank you very much, several times. Thank you. Okay, we're checking the microphone right now. Anyway, so thanks very much for your presentation, and the question is the following. You're speaking here about the creation of MVP1, as far as I understand. And the development of automation is something different. It should incorporate MVP2 or even MVP3. Well, basically yes, but those are really rarely, you cannot see this term quite often. Usually it's MVP and iterations, products, and so on. Okay, I see. Anyway, so to work further on within the same AVPs, basically does it make sense or not? Well, of course, you have to limit it, because even if we have endless budget, and we will not have endless time, endless electricity, and if there are no limitations, then we will not be focused enough. So discipline and limitations are very good for decision making. The other issue is that Why should we limit ourselves in MVPs? So we have a test strategy. The risks are stated there. You have a test plan. Those risks are also influencing the test plan. So basically, you have dealt with your priorities and with your limitations. And I do not know how it is transferred to MVP. So basically, you create an MVP, you develop the automation, the coverage growth according to all our limitations. So I agree with you fully. And I don't see any question here. Well, it was not a question, it was rather a clarification, so to say. Thank you. Thank you indeed. There are only two parameters. So it depends on how many tests and how many tests we can develop and how much time it will take us to support the old ones and how many defects the automation process finds and how well they are localized. Okay, 2, 3 of them. But you said that at the MVP point of time there are 20 tests. Well, it will show full cycle. You have 20 bricks. You want to build the pyramid of Cheops, so you don't know what to show. Well, that's true. No, what I mean is that so those things are you're not changing your set, and you are not doing it with the MVP. Well, of course, MVP is not the phase where you are changing the technology stack. Basically, there is the previous stage, prototyping, and MVP is a minimum valuable product. It is not the research. It is not verification. It is not the way to get the feedback. It is just something that is the cheapest way to sell, cheapest thing to sell. So if we, sorry, but there is some things with customer development, and that thing in customer development is a bit different. Well, yeah, maybe, because there are some terminology disputes in the world, so there are no unified terminology in the world. So thank you very much for your question. I'll try to check it out from the customer development point. Okay, so do you have some practical examples of those situations when the point of payoff does not happen? And so what are the mistakes, and what do we do? Do we start the whole process from the very beginning, from the strategy, or we can change it on the flight? Well, as soon as the automation is done, so it is an engineering discipline, or it is the future testing, or whatever else, so whatever we call it. So as soon as this automation of testing is as a project, and we can see straight away that there are stages and phases, just like in any project. The most costly mistakes and errors are in the initial stages. So we have to find out which stage we have made a mistake at, and after that we have to go back and to try to find this mistake. So if we have shown those risks that didn't work and did not mention the risks that did work, and those risks changed our test plan automatically, and probably it also influenced the prototyping because there were some other tasks were part of it. So here I would just go back, classically go back. There is a lot of examples. Any risk, you can take any risk from the client that the client was not ready to invest into to mitigation of this risk. So in this case, our automation was cost effective. So not a very stable UI, for example, and it just happens because the client does not understand it. So that's some specificities of our business. There are many of examples, and that's why there is another presentation, algorithms of automation on a project. And we are speaking about what we have to do, how to go back, how deeply we should go back, and how to make two or one decision, So there are many questions, but all of them are at the same level. Basically, the strategy has changed, so we have to change the planning, the prototyping, and so on. So we take one universal stack, we make the code from the scratch, we take two parallel stacks, and we make this decision. So if I understand your question correctly, I hope I have answered it. Thank you very much for your presentation. You are dealing with many projects, and to automate, have you tried to automate this process? So for example, you have a project, we write in the parameters, what reporting system we should use, what automation tools, what specialists with soft and hard skills. So have you tried this process? If you want to buy this franchise, so please come over, visit us. Actually, so there is through flow, of course, to get concrete numbers. In a ROI, for example, we need a prototyping stage. So we have a standard auto test, for example, and we don't know how much time it will take us to make this code without prototyping. So we need this prototyping for ROI. They're all interconnected. For example, some planning has changed. We decided to add something or to get rid of something, and the ROI changes as soon as the prototype changes. So that's the way we're choosing our optimum in the line of iterations. So if we make a calculator, for example, to fill in this calculator, it takes about 30 seconds. But to get the data for prototyping, well, it takes a lot more time. We were discussing working weeks and so on. So it is not worth it. Maybe. So I think that all of it are cherries on top of a cake. So first we have to implement the practices at different levels, and then after that try to optimize in your specific company. But I think that it is an interesting idea anyway. The more health checks you have, the better it is, so that we see that we need to pay attention to something. So the project will be more stable and the process will be more stable. Thanks a lot. Hello, thank you. So unfortunately, the speaker is not using the microphone, so I cannot hear the question. The speaker is still not using the microphone, so unfortunately I cannot translate the question due to this technical issue. Well, that's exactly what we are doing. Just a second. Because ROI always consists of at least two tabs. We are comparing something to something else. So we had a manual one, now it is automated. So it costs one amount of money, and in the second case it costs the second amount of money. So basically we are comparing two tabs and see that, for example, today for one test we need 3 working weeks. After automation has been implemented, it will take us, so for example, several days. It depends. And if we start doing it not one iteration, and if we do it during the nighttime, for example, then it will take us this amount of time. So basically, if everything is fine, you will not be able to sell it to anybody. So try to sell it to a person, a philosopher. Try to sell him a drill, for example. So it's the same thing. He'll not need it. And the speaker is not using the microphone again, unfortunately. I will explain it. So if there is no problem, we will not be able to explain anything. The person says, okay, I'm happy, I don't have a problem here. So that's it. So the first thing you have to do is to demonstrate the problem. And the problem is actually the example. So for example, our software is not according to some standard. That's why we cannot sell it anymore. Or in 1 year, the standard will be updated and we will not be able to sell the product again. Or some final users, end users are finding some errors and bugs each day, and they're more critical. So the problem is basically that quality assurance is not doing their job well. So after you have shown the problem, you have to show the tabs and compare them. And there you write that we have the current condition and it will lead us to nowhere, and if we change it to automation and there will be some regression, it will be cheaper and it will be the way to somewhere at least. We can try to see some intermediary results, interim results, and then we'll see what we can compare to what. And it is quite easy with diagrams and with money. People understand those two issues. You can do it even if you don't know the risks yet. So frankly speaking, it is a very universal way, so you can use it for anything basically. But I might be wrong, of course. Thank you very much for your presentation. The question is the following. You have gone through all the stages, strategy, planning, you have developed MVP, now you start developing tests, and then it happens that either due to some changes to requirements as we're working in Agile, or due to the fact that there was some kind of an error, we understand that the architecture was chosen incorrectly, or not optimally, at least at this particular stage. And this payoff point was not reached or wasn't reached. It's not that important, but still to continue developing auto tests, when realized that it's going to be extremely expensive. So should we change the architecture or try to somehow change what we have now? So basically we have this colorful scheme, and then suddenly it turns out that we have made a mistake. It does not matter if it was us or our client or the objective reality, so the scheme does not working anymore. So basically we are using this universal solution, ROI and calculator. We just see how much it costs to do manual testing, how much it costs to automate the old sample, and how much the alternative option costs. So we can see advantages and disadvantages, and we can make some notes on that. So basically we transfer to this green stage, from the green stage to the blue stage. So if the problem is there, it means that we are crossing on the green stage, but we still have to go one step back in order to make a reasonable decision, and maybe to invest something into prototyping as well. So that's what I would do. I would just go step by step. So colleagues, either it is also understandable or the lunch is so close. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention.